All right, let's dive into two of the most powerful and maybe most misunderstood ideas in all of economics. We're talking about the fundamental theorems of welfare economics. These are essentially the bedrock for how economists think about what markets do and whether what they do is actually good for us. It really all comes back to this one huge question, doesn't it? It's a question that fuels everything from dinner table arguments to massive political campaigns. But to really tackle it, economists need a framework, a way to think about it precisely. And to build that framework, we need to introduce our two main characters. On one side, you have the competitive equilibrium. Think of this as what the market produces when left to its own devices. And on the other side, we have Pareto efficiency. This is the economist's ideal, a world with absolutely no waste. The entire story of welfare economics is about the relationship between these two. Do they get along? Now, we have to be super clear about what Pareto efficiency means, because it's not about what you might think. It has nothing to do with fairness or equality. All it means is that we're not being wasteful. You know, if there's a way to make you happier without hurting me at all, and we don't do it, that's inefficient. A Pareto-efficient world is one where all those easy wins are gone. You can't help anyone without taking from someone else. It's about squeezing every last drop of potential out of what we've got. Okay, so that brings us to the first part of our story. This is the First Welfare Theorem. And if you've ever heard of Adam Smith's famous invisible hand, well, this is basically that idea put into modern mathematical language. And it makes a promise that is, frankly, pretty stunning. And here's the promise right here. The First Welfare Theorem says that as long as a few key conditions hold, the market's natural outcome, that competitive equilibrium, will automatically be that ideal planner's goal of Pareto efficiency. It's an incredibly powerful case for just letting markets do their thing. The idea is that the selfish actions of individuals can lead to a socially desirable outcome. So how on earth does that happen? It's not really magic. The logic is pretty straightforward. Think about it. In a competitive market, we all face the same set of prices. You make the best choices for you, I make the best choices for me, businesses make the best choices for them. And if the market's clear, it means that every possible win-win trade has already happened. There are no $100 bills just lying on the sidewalk for someone to scoop up. And this process creates efficiency in three amazing ways at once. First, the right goods get to the right people. Second, our resources, like labor and capital, get used by the right firms. And third, the mix of stuff being made is exactly the mix of stuff that people actually want. The price system, that invisible hand, coordinates all of this without anyone being in charge. So markets are perfect? Problem solved? We can all just pack it in and mow home? Well, not so fast. Like any promise that sounds too good to be true, the First Welfare Theorem comes with some really important fine print. And this is where the clean world of theory crashes into our messy reality. Right. So what is the catch? Why isn't the real world a perfectly efficient paradise? Well, the whole thing hinges on the words under standard assumptions. See, the theorem works in a very specific kind of world. A world with perfect competition, where nobody has the power to set prices. A world where there's a market for absolutely everything you can imagine, from clean air to insurance against weird risks. If you break any of these assumptions, the whole beautiful promise of efficiency can completely fall apart. And guess what? In the real world, these assumptions break all the time. We call these breaks market failures. And this is where the First Welfare Theorem becomes incredibly useful, but as a diagnostic tool. When we see a problem like pollution or not enough national parks, the theorem tells us, aha, go find the broken assumption. Let's take a classic externality. A farmer uses fertilizer, which helps him grow more crops. Great. But that fertilizer runs off into a river and that harms people downstream. The problem is there's no market for river pollution, so the price of the farmer's corn doesn't reflect the true cost to society. The result? The market gives us way too much fertilizer and way too much pollution. That's inefficient. Or think about a public good. Say a farmer decides to keep part of her land wild to support bees. Those bees then go and pollinate all the neighboring farms for free. The neighbors get a huge benefit, but they don't pay for it. That's the famous free rider problem. And because of it, the market will always give us too few of these beneficial things, because why would any one person bear the full cost for only a fraction of the benefit? So if the first theorem tells us markets can be fragile and often fail, is that it? Are we just stuck? Well, this is where our second hero enters the story, the Second Welfare Theorem.
And it gives us a completely different and, in some ways, much more hopeful way to think about the world. It gives us a tool to separate the goal of efficiency from the goal of fairness. Now, I know that sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but the core idea is actually revolutionary. It says that out of all the possible efficient outcomes, we can pick the one we think is the most fair. And then we can use the power of the market to get us there. All we have to do is adjust everyone's starting point.
And this is the absolute key takeaway. Remember, the first theorem said markets lead to an efficient outcome, but it could be a horribly unfair one. An outcome where one person has everything and everyone else starves is technically Pareto efficient. The second theorem says, hey, we don't have to accept that. Society can decide what's fair and then use the market as a powerful engine to get to that fair outcome efficiently.
The best way to think about it is like a race. Step 1 is the job of a social planner, or, the government, to adjust the starting blocks to make the race feel fair. That's the equity part. Then, for step 2, the planner fires the starting pistol and just lets the market run the race. And the theorem promises that the market will run that race with perfect efficiency, no matter where we set up the starting blocks. But there's a catch here too, a really big one. The way the planner is supposed to move those starting blocks is with something called lump sum transfers. In theory, these are magical transfers of wealth that don't change your behavior one bit. It would be like a tax based on your height or something you can't change, instead of a tax on your income, which you can. This is the second theorem's own fine print, and honestly, in the real world, finding these perfectly non-distorting transfers is next to impossible.
So, where does this leave us? What's the point of all this theory? Well, when you put both of these theorems together, you don't get a perfect answer, but you do get an incredibly powerful toolkit for thinking about economic policy and the role of government in our lives.
This really sums it all up, doesn't it? The first theorem is our benchmark. It's our ideal, perfect world that we can compare reality to. It helps us spot problems, those market failures like pollution. The second theorem, on the other hand, is our design tool. It gives us a conceptual guide telling us that, in principle, we can tackle fairness and efficiency as two separate problems. We can aim for the society we want and then use markets to help us get there. And that leaves us with one last big question. If we have this beautiful theoretical map to a world that's both fair and efficient, why is the journey in the real world so incredibly difficult? It's because the map is not the territory. In practice, things are messy. We have politics, we have imperfect information, and it's almost impossible to design policies like those perfect lump sum transfers that don't create a whole new set of problems. The theorems don't give us easy answers, but without them, we'd be completely lost.